Well, as Dylan or as Steve would say, good morning, church. I almost wore jeans, boots, and a t-shirt. But I decided to wear something that was just a little dressier, you know. I always say. You do what you got to do. It's good to be with you this morning. I hope to be able to encourage you just a little bit. I have had numerous opportunities to preach about the state in several different churches, and I really enjoy that. I get to meet people and see what they're doing and what they're involved. And the state of the church is really pretty good across the country. Lots of stuff going on. The church is growing in many ways. Outreach is being accomplished in ways that perhaps you've never seen. And the response is good in a lot of places. There's certainly challenges. But today I want to preach from Hebrews, the 10th chapter and the 3rd chapter and a bunch of other places. Just try to give you an encouraging word because the church, I think, needs that with some regularity. And I pray as you walk out of here today that perhaps you will be an encouraging person to the one who is beside you, the one who is in front of you, behind you, or perhaps one that is not here today. I know that there are lots of folks who are camping, they're out running around, the weather's really good, the fish are biting, the canoes are working, all those good things. I pray they come home in one piece and that next week you can, well, on Wednesday nights you can be ready to grab one of those greased pigs. Anybody over 60 going to go for that? Stand up. You're thinking about the bull. They're going to have a bull ride here and all that kind of stuff. Just a real opportunity to come and hurt yourself, but it'll be a lot of fun, and you can cheer for those who do. Just really good to be with you this morning. Got a question. I want you to raise your hand if you do not have a cell phone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not very many of you. Most of us have cell phones. And even if you don't have one, it appears to me that almost everybody wants to get connected in some way. Everybody else wants to be involved with each other. There's only, not only cell phones, but there's Facebook, there's Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, so many other things, even the post office out there to help us to connect. I was at the bank the other day. The bank here in Pleasant Hill. You walk in the door, and the bank is recruiting people for events to help them connect. The bank is trying to help you to connect with one another. They're trying to get you to go on trips to Israel, to Alaska, and other places like that. The bank, for Pete's sakes, they'll take you to a Cubs game. They're not making any money on it. They just want to do something for the community. Isn't that great? The bank. And if you go over here to the library, John and the girls have a lot of stuff over there. They organize trips for folks, all kinds of places around town, around the state. You can get in a city paid-for bus and go to John Deere in Waterloo if you want to. Take a tour. They'll pay for it because they want to help the community to connect like we don't already connect a lot. If you go to the Altoona Library, you walk in there, they have a Lego club. The library has a Lego club so that the kids in the community who never see each other at school or in daycare and those kinds of places or on the baseball field have a chance to connect. Have a chance to connect. Oh, we're concerned about connecting. And it appears that people want to be connected, but evidently there isn't much success in that. Not much success. We're connected technically, but maybe not so personally. And God didn't intend it that way, folks. God didn't intend it that way. The Bible tells us that when God made man, he said in Genesis 2nd chapter, verse 18, it is not good for man to be alone. We were made with a desire to connect, to belong to somebody, to feel like we're included, to be accepted by other people. We want their praise, their recognition. And the word that expresses that togetherness in the Bible, that sharing of ourselves with one another, is the word fellowship. Experiencing fellowship is so important because life has a way of just wearing us down. And we tend to get real discouraged. Look at these words from Proverbs, the 17th chapter, verse 22. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. There's times when we'll have a broken spirit. And I imagine many of the folks in Houston and Louisiana are feeling that in many, many ways this week. There's times when you feel like your strength is gone and you're not going to be able to overcome the adversity that's in front of you. And sometimes when I drive home from other places in the state, when I'm in a meeting with a lot of people where I hear about what's going on in their lives, I'm almost stunned by the amount of hurt that they carry inside of themselves. And all around us are people who are being crushed by life. Their marriages are falling apart. Their finances are a mess. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their kids. They have regrets, just huge regrets about the past. And their health, it's just not what it used to be. Life has a way of just wearing us down. And it's part of the reason why I like jokes, because it makes you laugh. It's good medicine for the bones. And I was playing golf with Brother Larry Slaughter on Monday. And he says, I got one for you. You should use it on Sunday. So, Larry, here it is. What does Daddy Buffalo say to Junior Buffalo as Junior Buffalo goes back to the herd? Bye, son. I knew they would groan. I knew it. It was Tuesday. And while we're at it, Brother Jeff gave me some this morning. It's pretty good. A little girl asked her mom, how did the human race appear? Mother answered, well, God made Adam and Eve, and they had children, and so was all of mankind made. 2 days later, the child asked her father the same question, and the father answered, many years ago, there were monkeys from which the human race evolved. And so the confused little girl returned to her mom and said, Mom, how is it possible that you told me the human race was created by God, and Dad said it was developed from monkeys? The mother answered, well, dear, it's pretty simple. I told you about my side of the family. Your father told you about his. An 8-year-old boy says to his dad, when I grow up, I want to be a musician. Dad replies, you can't have it both ways. Think about it for a moment. You'll get it. Pretty good. A 55-year-old man was born on May 5th. Been married for 5 years, has 5 kids, makes $55,555.55 a year. His lucky number is 5. He receives a phone call from a friend. The friend informs the man that a horse named Lucky 5 will be running in the 5th race at the local track that evening. So the man withdraws $5,555 cash from his bank account and goes to the races and bets on Lucky 5 to win. Sure enough, the horse comes in 5th. Laughter is good for the bones. It's good medicine. It's good medicine. When we're discouraged, what usually happens, folks, we start complaining, we're feeling sorry for ourselves. A lot of people become very bitter, and then they just isolate themselves. They go and hide. Woe is me. Sometimes they get so discouraged, that even the Christian people stop going to church, and it's sad when that happens because that's when we need each other the most. And isolation is not the answer. There's a reason why we as Christians need to be concerned about and to encourage each other. There's a reason for it. In John the 13th chapter, verse 35, Jesus said, "By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." And Jesus loves us without reservation. And the way that we can show other people that we are his followers is to do the same for one another. 1 Thessalonians 5th chapter, verse 11, Paul says, "Therefore encourage one another and build up one another, just as you also are doing." And in Matthew 22, Jesus said, a theme verse here at the church, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like unto it, you shall" what? As what? I don't want to do that. I like me. I don't like them so much. Seriously. How do you love your neighbor as yourself? What would that look like if you did? A lot of people don't understand that Christianity is all about relationship. If you don't know it, that's what it is, a relationship with God, a relationship with others. It is not about rules. It is not about knowledge. It is about loving and lasting relationships. One of my favorite movies, and perhaps you've seen it, is Amazing Grace. If you don't have it, I'd be glad to let you borrow it, but I want it back. It's one of my faves. It's really, really good. It's called Amazing Grace because it's the story of William Wilberforce and John Newton. John Newton was the author of Amazing Grace, if you don't know that. But this man that's on your screen now was William Wilberforce. He was a parliamentarian. He was one of the Earls of England. He was a British man who worked for years to get Parliament to abolish slavery in England. Over and over again, the Parliament rejected him and voted against him, even laughed in his face, and discouraged and sick, he was about ready to give up. And then his pastor, his friend, his old mentor, John Newton, who was on his deathbed himself, asked for a pen and a paper, and with trembling hand, Newton wrote these words to Wilberforce: "Unless God has raised you up for this very thing, you will be worn out by the opposition of men and of devils. But if God be for you, who can be against you? Are all of them stronger than God? Oh, be not weary of well-doing. Go on in the name of God and in the power of his might." 6 days later, Newton died. But Wilberforce made another run at Parliament. And in 1833, the vote came once more onto the floor. And Parliament finally voted to end slavery in Britain. And his vote kept the British from being an ally of the South during the Civil War. Can you imagine how different history would have been if Wilberforce had not been successful in England 30 years before the Civil War started? What if John Newton hadn't encouraged Wilberforce? Encouragement in our walk with Christ is so important because there's just so much at stake. This is no game. This is not a game. Hebrews, the 10th chapter, verse 25, says that we are not to forsake our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. I really believe that Jesus is coming back soon, and eternity is at stake for everyone, not just you. And it's important that we encourage one another. A preacher down in Texas by the name of Rich actually said this. I thought it was a really good quote. You cannot honor the Father by avoiding his other children. And you cannot follow Christ by ignoring his church. So how do we encourage? We know we should. How do we do it? How do we encourage effectively? And I know this morning as I'm standing here, in some ways I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are the best in town. You are the most interested in the things of the Lord. You are to be honored above all others. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Your being here is such an encouragement and makes such a difference for others, not just you. It's important that you be here. Listen again to Hebrews 10:25. Let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. That's the New Living Translation. And if you study the Bible about what it says about the church, there's some things that you cannot do well from a distance. There's just some things you can't do from a distance. This morning, you could have turned on your TV to watch me. You could have turned on your TV and heard some great sermons from Texas or Georgia, Florida, and I have to admit, my favorite is this guy, T.D. Jakes. I love him. He's a wordsmith guy. He's really, really good. There's some of his doctrine I have difficulty with, but I'll tell you what, I enjoy listening to him. And Jonathan's kind of right there with me on it. Sue, she thinks he yells too much. So she usually walks away when we flip him on. But you could have turned on to watch him or others. You could have seen, you could have heard inspiring music. If you have a sound bar underneath your TV, it would have sounded magnificent. You could have even chosen what kind of music you like. So why don't you just turn on the TV and stay in your pajamas? You do wear pajamas when you watch TV, right? That's not what the church is about, folks. The church gave the people of God a task, and it goes beyond the preaching and the music, or your comfort for that matter. As important as those things are, He's called us to be a family. He's called us to be a community, a fellowship. He's called us to come to know and to love one another. Over and over again, the New Testament uses the phrase, one another. Perhaps you recognize some of these. Love one another. Serve one another. Forgive one another. Encourage one another. And watching TV won't do that, either for you or anybody else. The only way you can effectively encourage one another is to commit yourselves to being a part of the church family. That's the only way it's going to happen. Not just coming for the sermon, not just coming for communion, not just coming for the music, but to live in relationship with one another. We need each other. And so Hebrews 10 talks about how we can consider to encourage one another. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. The New Living Translation says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. If you're going to encourage one another, it's going to take some thought. And the way that you encourage one might not be the most effective way to encourage another. But it's not an excuse to do nothing. The Greek word translated encourage usually has kind of a negative meaning, if you will, because it means to irritate a little bit, to incite. It kind of suggests the idea of prodding just a little bit, poking. Get her done, get her done. And the idea isn't that it's everybody else's responsibility to you. It's your responsibility to them. You have no excuse. You have no excuse because you can do it. It's kind of like a company that's negotiated a new health insurance plan. Everybody is required, 100% participation has to be. The company has laid it out there, both labor and management. They've all got to sign it. The plan won't go into effect unless everybody does. And so everybody signs up because it's a pretty good plan. Sounds like a good deal. Everybody signs up except Sam. There's always one, right? Sam doesn't do it. He refuses to do it. His wife pleads with him. The guys on the line say, hey, come on, Sam, sign this thing. But he won't do it. And finally, the president of the company calls him into the office, says, Sam, this health club is too good for us to lose out on. Here's the application. Here's a pen. I want you to sign it. And I'm sorry that if you don't sign this, I'm going to have to fire you. And without hesitation, Sam gets the pen, signs it. When he gets done, the president says, why did you wait so long? Tell me why you didn't sign it earlier. And the guy says, well, nobody explained it to me quite as clearly before. I get it. I get it. That's basically the idea of encourage here in a positive way to incite others to acts of love and good works. And for some of you, that happens quite naturally. You just do it. It's just part of your personality. You enjoy doing it. It's just part of who you are. And that's some of the gifts that have been given in Romans, the 12th chapter, verses 6 through 8. Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith. If in service, in his serving. Or he who teaches, in his teaching. Or he who exhorts, in his exhortation. He who gives with liberality. He who leads with diligence. He who shows mercy with cheerfulness. And the New Living Translation says it this way: if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. Do it gladly. Use your gift of encouragement. It's vital. It's needed by everybody. But for a lot of us who don't have that gift, it doesn't happen unless we plan for it, unless we consider and plan how to do it. So let me give you some ideas on how you can encourage here at Rising Sun, how I can encourage others. Take a look at this. I don't know what your mailbox looks like. Mine doesn't look that good. It's been run over 2 or 3 times. Doesn't look that good. And mine's just stuffed every day, full of catalogs and bills and junk mail. I get so much stuff that really just goes straight to the recycle bin. But when I get in that pile of mail and I find a handwritten note, that comes to the top and gets read first. I imagine it's like that for you too. And one of the most effective ways to encourage somebody is just a simple note telling them that you're thinking of them and praying for them. Doesn't take much, but it shows thought. Another would be, I have a love-hate relationship with this piece of equipment that should come up here momentarily. You got one of those? Most of you said you did. Sometimes I am stressed by the idea of answering it or just neglecting it. I'm torn between the desire of answering or just throwing it out the window. But what would happen? And in both of my vehicles, I have a button on my steering wheel that's connected and synced to my phone. When I think of somebody, all I have to do is press a button and say, call Amy Gamble. Sorry, Amy, I just saw you sitting there. And the phone will do the dialing and everything. I can keep my eyes up and watch the road, and I can have a conversation with her or anybody else. Just that quick. What would happen if you picked up your phone to text or to say, I don't have much time, but God has put you on my mind. I want you to know I'm praying for you today. No agenda. Don't have to have an answer. That you're just there to encourage them in what they're doing. Could you use your phone to encourage another, to text them and not just pass along gossip or some little thing about what you're doing right now with some animal in the backyard? Couldn't you use it more constructively? Some of you have lost a loved one. Some of you have bereavement anniversaries that can be tough for you. And you know of others that are in the same boat. And use your concern and your empathy to encourage somebody. And the best way, perhaps, to encourage is not through words at all. Sometimes just listening, working to understand the other's person. Understanding oftentimes is better than advice. There's just countless ways to do it. And I encourage you to think of ways to do that. Think of positive ways to encourage one another. Put some thought into it. You can do it. When you get it, you're blessed and you're thankful. Be an advocate and do it yourself. And then do it daily. Do it daily. Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verse 13 says, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it's still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Encourage daily, even if there's little to encourage. Okay? I love the choirs and the ministry of the choirs for years. I'm looking forward to leading the adult choir this fall for a while, and I encourage you to participate in that. Our choirs are really pretty good, but some churches have choirs that really aren't very good, and one particular wasn't known for their music. And there was an older lady in the congregation, an older lady, who was kind of known to be an encourager. She always had the ability to say something that was constructive on almost every situation. But when it came to the choir, she was hard put to say anything too positive. So she thought about it for a while, and one Sunday morning, as the choir members were filling up the choir loft, she leaned over to her friend and she said, aren't they walking in well this morning? That's not usually what we say, is it? We're pretty good about slapping them around first. We need to learn to be positive if we can be. There's always something positive that you can say. And the reason we need to encourage every day is pretty simple. If we don't make it a regular habit, we'll only do it when we feel like it. When you came this morning, it's likely that you weren't particularly thinking about other people's needs. I wonder how many in the church even crossed your mind on the drive over here. Whether they be your students in Sunday school class, the people who are sitting around you or whatever. I wonder how many of you even it crossed your mind. it's probably true of most of us. And opportunities for encouragement will only come your way when you regularly look for them. You guys have seats that are identified with your names on them. When you die, we'll say that's where they used to sit. You need to know the people who are around you. Pray for them, encourage them, and on Sunday morning, let them know of your concern for them. Regularly look for ways to do that. In Proverbs, the 12th chapter, verse 25, it says that anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word, makes it glad. When I was in the 3rd grade, I had a piano teacher in Longmont, Colorado. Her name was Mrs. Anderson. She had a little studio, piano and organ in there, and I took lessons from Mrs. Anderson. And one day, I stayed a little late. I was just kind of playing, and she was kind of dinking around in the kitchen. And she come back, and she says, "Keep playing. You're good at this. A lot of the kids can play what you play, but there's a difference between you and the rest of the kids that are my students. You feel it." I have never forgotten that. I have never forgotten what that lady said to me that day. You feel it. What an encouragement it was in my life. An elder in a rural country church down in Arkansas. When I was about 19 years old, a guy named Forrest King, I was preaching there, my first sermon. And I'm pretty sure there are fingerprints underneath the pulpit. I could probably go back there and find those. But Forrest said to me, "It was worth the drive today to hear what you had to say." Really? I've never forgotten that. I don't know if it was true, but I have no reason to doubt it, particularly, so why not give him the benefit of the doubt? I'm so thankful that he said that because it's a great encouragement to me. Don Evans was a professor at Ozark Christian College, and Don was in charge of the radio department there. Doug Raymond and I did color basketball games. Doug would do the play-by-play, and I'd do the color. They did not give us $100,000 a year to do that. But we did it for quite a while, and I had another program that kind of happened in the day on just a local campus channel. And Don Evans came to me one day, and he said, "You're one of the best that we have. I want you to host our flagship Sunday morning program." And they put it on KSSO, which flooded the four-corner area of Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas. And I got to do that for a year. And I'll tell you what he said to me pushed me to do it and to do better than I had ever done myself, because I wanted to show him that his confidence in me was real and worthwhile. Later on, when I was living in Canada, I was living in Calgary. Alberta Bible College is there. I was involved. I had a couple students living in my apartment with me. The music people from the college moved to California to be involved in a music ministry down there. Boyd called me into his office one day and he sat me down and he says, "I want you to teach the music program here at the Bible College and some of the Christian education courses. I'd like you to do that." I said, "Boyd, I don't have the pedigree. I don't have the knowledge." And you know what he said to me? He says, "I want you to teach the kids what you do." I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I said, "Okay." And for 7 years, I got to do that. I'll tell you what, it stretched me, it pushed me, it pulled me, it gave me opportunity, and I can't begin to tell you what a difference those folks made in my life. And I'm eternally grateful for just a few words from a few folks who have made my life better and given me opportunity. In Proverbs, the 18th chapter, verse 21, it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and your encouraging word to one of the young people that are running up and down the hall and almost knock you over. Your encouraging word to one of the older folks who can't get around here and long for some kind of fellowship besides the TV. The things that you could do that can make a difference and change their lives might even change your own. So I encourage you as a church body not to complain about a lot of the frou-frou, but encourage one another in your walk in the Lord and as a community of faith. Do not grow weary in well-doing. Do not grow weary in well-doing. This morning, Gary's going to come and be here at the front. If there's those who would have a desire to express faith in Christ Jesus and to be baptized into Him, he'll be here as we sing here in a moment. But I'm going to ask you to stand, and then we're going to pray together. Then we're going to sing together. And come as we sing if you have a desire for that, or for all of us to pray and encourage you in your walk with Him. Would you stand, please?